Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe, and we've got another great episode for you today. We are continuing our NFL 2026 season preview, going division by division. We've already completed 5 of the 8 divisions, and today we're going to talk about the AFC South. Now, the AFC South, it's not like it used to be. This used to be a wide-open division. Any team could win it, but you knew they weren't really going to do much because they're coming from the AFC South. That's not the case this year. There are multiple teams that legitimately have a shot of making a run. But we'll go in order previewing each of these teams. We'll start with the Jaguars because they won the division last year and talk about a team that had quite the turnaround. They went from a 4-13 team to a 13-4 team, won the AFC South, got the number 3 seed, got significantly better on both sides of the ball. Went from 26th in scoring the year before to 6th last year. On defense, they went from 27th in points allowed to 8th last year. They were a top 10 team on both sides of the ball. And Liam Cohen joined Dan Campbell in proving that introductory press conferences have absolutely no bearing on your abilities as a head coach in the NFL. Duval. Remember that? Not quite as egregious as Dan Campbell. We're going to go eat a kneecap, man. We're going to take this kneecap over here. We're going to take this kneecap over there. We're going to fall down on the ground. We're going to get back up. We're going to bite you again. Take another kneecap if you have a third one. If you don't have a third one, we'll get you a third one. Then we're going to bite that one too. But Cohen was the biggest reason for the turnaround last year, and it was because he got Trevor Lawrence to play the way everyone expected Lawrence to play when he came into the NFL. Now, Lawrence, I did a whole thing on him on a podcast late last season where I talked about what type of quarterback he is. And my basic point was that Lawrence is a quarterback who he has to have plays defined for him. He has to have places to go with the ball. You don't want him sitting in the pocket, getting to his third or fourth read. And look, this is kind of the case for most NFL quarterbacks. But with Lawrence, for him to succeed, he has to be able to play in rhythm and timing early in the play. But for that to happen, route concepts have to work. Receivers have to be clearly open. The defense has to be clearly defined. And good offensive coordinators, they're able to create that sort of setting for their quarterback. They're able to make it so you can clearly understand what the defense is doing. You can identify the coverage pre-snap and early post-snap. You have route concepts that break down the coverage, put defenders in conflict, give you a clear choice as a quarterback. And once Lawrence got comfortable in Cohen's system towards the end of last season, he was unbelievable. There was a 6-game stretch there where he had 15 touchdown passes, just 1 interception, a 113.2 passer rating. Also ran for another 149 yards and 4 touchdowns during that span. Jaguars won all 6 of those games. And that's what catapulted them to the division title. But what you saw in those games were Trevor Lawrence looking extremely comfortable, just hitting his back foot. The first read wasn't there. He didn't have to go past his second receiver, rarely got to his third receiver, and everything was sort of set up for him. Now, that might seem like it's a knock on Trevor Lawrence, but this is the reality of how most quarterbacks in the NFL play. Most quarterbacks are not Tom Brady, where they can sit in the pocket and comfortably get to their 5th read, and if they don't like that one, maneuver within the pocket and then go back and find an open receiver somewhere. Most quarterbacks don't play like that. They need to have number 1, number 2, number 3 be open, and if they're not open, they run, especially in today's NFL. And Cohen did a great job of creating those situations for Lawrence. Did so with motion, personnel distribution, formation. There are all sorts of ways that coaches do it, and Cohen had a great plan. He did a great job of it. He did the same thing when he was in Tampa with Baker Mayfield, and that was really the biggest reason for their success on offense. Now, on the other side of the ball, their turnaround was led by new defensive coordinator Anthony Campanelli. And it was tough to know what exactly he was going to do coming into last season because he hadn't been a DC in the NFL before. You could sort of guess what he was going to do. He was the linebackers coach for the Dolphins from 2020 to 2023. During that time, he worked under Brian Flores, spent a year with Vic Fangio there. In 2024, he went to the Packers and was their linebackers coach under Jeff Hafley. So you kind of had that basis of those 3 defensive coordinators, those 3 defensive minds being potentially the template for what he was going to do. And that's really the way it played out last season. The Jaguars ranked 9th in split safety coverage, which is that Fangio influence. They ranked 5th in cover 2 usage, 13th in cover 0 usage, and 5th in 6-man pressures. That combination is really the Brian Flores influence. And then they ranked 12th in sim pressure percentage, which you could say is the Jeff Hafley influence, but a lot of coaches in the NFL are doing those sim pressures. But regardless, that combination of defensive approaches, I think it did a good job of confusing quarterbacks, forcing hesitation in quarterbacks. They didn't win based on their pass rush. They were just 18th in pressure percentage and 27th in sacks, which you normally don't see for a defense that ends up performing well. So everything for them seemed to be generated by their coverage first and potentially making quarterbacks uncomfortable with what they were seeing. Because the best thing about this defense is that they created turnovers. They were second in the NFL in takeaways. Between that and the fact that they were very good at defending the run, they finished the year number 1 in rushing defense. They were able to be one of the better defensive units in the league, and that, as much as anything, contributed to them winning 13 games 1 year after winning just 4. Now, if I have concerns about the Jaguars going into this season, my first concern is Trevor Lawrence. I want to believe that the quarterback we saw at the end of last season is the Lawrence that we're going to see for the rest of his career. As I've said many times before, I'm a Giants fan, but I love seeing good quarterback play. I love seeing good young quarterbacks develop into long-time franchise QBs. And so I'm rooting for Lawrence to become that guy. And I think we've all been waiting for him to become that guy. He just hasn't yet. He's had stretches. He's gone through different periods of time throughout his career where he's played really well and you think, okay, he's about to turn the corner. But then injuries hit or he just starts spraying the ball over the field. So maybe, hopefully, this is the time that we see him really turn into that quarterback we all expected when he came out in the draft. Because last year was the highest level he's ever played at. So maybe he found something. But like I said, my concern is, well, we haven't seen him put it together for a long period of time. Back-to-back seasons, that sort of thing. So I'm not going to count on it. I'm cautiously optimistic that he will continue to play the same way, but I'm not betting on it. The other concern I think you could have about the Jaguars is I'm not sure they did enough this offseason to really improve their roster. I think they certainly lost more talent than they added. Lost key players like Travis Etienne, linebacker Devin Lloyd, and they didn't really add any needle movers on either side of the ball. Now, they will get Travis Hunter back, who missed a majority of last season. Still questions about what side of the ball he'll play on. I hope we see him play both sides. I hope we see the Shohei Ohtani of football in Travis Hunter. But having him back could be an argument for them being better this year. Maybe with all the players that they drafted and added last year, they will be 1 year better, 1 year more comfortable in the offensive and defensive systems that were implemented. But just looking at them on paper, I don't know that the roster is actually better this year. And in fact, I think you could say they took at least a tiny step back. And this year, they're going to be the hunted. They're not going to sneak up on anybody. Let's move on to our next AFC South team, the Houston Texans. And this isn't just any team in the NFL right now. This is, to me, arguably the best team in the AFC. I don't know if I'm ready to predict them going to the Super Bowl. I'll tell you why in a second. But this team is for real. That defense is absolutely ridiculous. They pretty much line up, tell you what's coming, and then they kick your ass. Doesn't matter that you know what they're going to do. They are so good at all three levels. They fly around the field at all three levels. It obviously starts with their pass rush, but they're beyond a sound defensive team. They're a dynamic defensive team. And they basically have everyone returning last year, plus they added reinforcements. In fact, the only defender who they lost from last season who played more than 40% of the snaps was the third linebacker on their depth chart, E.J. Speed. He's done after tearing his quad during offseason workouts, but everyone else is back. And then they added Jadeveon Clowney to be part of that pass rushing rotation, added Reed Blankenship at safety, got Stouder inside, trading up to take defensive tackle Caden McDonald with the 36th overall pick. Many believe he was the best interior D lineman in the draft. And I'm not going to say that was the weakness of the Texans last year. They still finished fourth against the run. But if you had an approach for beating the Texans, it would be try to pound them, try to run the ball between the tackles, neutralize that pass rush, stay out of those third down situations. The Texans were aware of that, so they made that trade in the draft to make sure that they are going to be stout in the middle. There's not a weakness on this defense, period. And that's why they have a chance to run through the AFC and get to the Super Bowl. What's the biggest question? I think you all know. C.J. Stroud, the quarterback. And it's absolutely shocking that he's the biggest question considering the rookie season he had. If I had told you 2 years ago that this is the conversation we were going to be having entering his fourth year, you would have thought I was an idiot. Maybe you still do. I don't know. That being said, C.J. Stroud, it's not even that the last 2 full seasons are what make you doubt his future. It really is the 2 playoff games he played this past January. And I hate saying that because I don't like to judge players, particularly quarterbacks, by 1 game or 2 games. Every great quarterback has postseason games where they didn't play well. Tom Brady had plenty of those. Peyton Manning did as well. Joe Montana had a 3-year stretch where he lost 3 straight playoff games, didn't throw 1 touchdown in any of those games, got knocked out of one, got benched for the second half of another, and then he came back to win 2 straight Super Bowls and a 3rd Super Bowl MVP in 1989. But the point is, bad playoff games happen. The concerning thing with C.J. Stroud isn't that he had a bad playoff game or 2 bad playoff games. It's the lack of awareness he showed in those games. The lack of poise he showed in those games. Everyone and their mother knew that the quarterback did not have to do much for the Texans to win their playoff games and potentially go on a Super Bowl run. All they had to do was not mess up. They could have kneeled on half of their possessions, and they would have been better off than what C.J. Stroud did last year. And that was he tried to play hero ball. He went into those games acting like, man, we're going to be in a shootout, and if I don't go make some plays, we have no shot. I might turn the ball over here and there, might make some mistakes, but we're going to win if I throw 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That's our only shot. We're going to get in a shootout. And we all know that wasn't really the case. What Stroud needed to do was manage the game and not turn the ball over. Above all else, protect the football. And he did the opposite. Turned it over 7 times. And these weren't even innocent turnovers. These weren't just, oh, hey, the ball got tipped. Stuff happens. These were his feet breaking down, throwing the ball from terrible positions, missing throws, throwing high in the rain, forcing throws to covered receivers. The pick 6 he threw against the Patriots that basically changed all the momentum. The Texans had just kind of taken control of that game, and then he rolled out to his left, had a defender in his face, still tried to make the throw downfield. Really ill-advised. The ball obviously went fluttering up in the air, and the Patriots returned it for a touchdown. There was no need for any of this. No need for any of these turnovers that C.J. Stroud had. Every single one of them could have been avoided by being more careful with where he was putting the ball, making better decisions, not forcing the ball. And that's what just didn't make sense because Stroud has never really played that way. Yeah, I think over the last 2 years, he's been a bit exposed, doesn't handle pressure in the pocket all that well, or maybe facing so much pressure over the last 2 years has created some bad habits. But whatever the case is, none of it was as ugly as it was against the Steelers and especially against the Patriots. I mean, I don't want to rule out that he's learned from those experiences. Of course he's going to learn. Being a quarterback in the NFL, being an athlete, being a person is all about evolution. No one just stays the same. So I'll give C.J. Stroud the benefit of the doubt and say that I think he can learn from that experience. It's just so puzzling to me that he had to go through that to learn that lesson because the lesson was just so obvious. And I kind of thought coming out of that Steelers game, because of how poorly he played and how much he almost threw their season away in that game, that he would have learned his lesson there, and there's no way he would have played the way he did the following week against the Patriots. And he was even worse. So I can't get in his head. I'm not going to make predictions and say that he can't come back from those 2 games last season. But it is something to watch because what's going to happen the first time that he throws an interception this year? Throws a pick 6. Is he going to have those thoughts start to creep into his head? I mean, that's why they play the game. That's something that I don't know, you don't know, but that is my biggest concern with this team, and it's the only thing that has me teetering on, do I pick the Texans as my Super Bowl favorites out of the AFC, or do I keep them as divisional round losers once again? Our next team, the Indianapolis Colts, what can you say about their season? They started off 8-2. They looked like a legit team, and then they just fell off of a cliff. Lost their final 7 games. The wheels just came off. Now, I wouldn't necessarily blame too many people on the Colts for this happening. They had some pretty devastating injuries. Daniel Jones was, of course, the biggest one. He was playing through a broken fibula for a couple of games, and then obviously ruptured his Achilles, missed the final 4+ games. Colts had to go and sign Phillip Rivers, 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, who hadn't played since the 2020 season. He started 3 of their final 4 games. On the defensive side of the ball, DeForest Buckner, who was really the key player inside on that defensive line, he missed significant time. Sauce Gardner, who they traded for in the middle of the season, he only played 4 games. They truly were a mash unit. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, this season comes down to Daniel Jones. Can he stay healthy? That's been a huge question throughout his career. He's had significant injuries multiple times, and that's one of the things that's kept him from being a more consistent quarterback because he has some of the best performances in NFL history. I'm going to repeat that. Daniel Jones has had some of the best performances by a quarterback in NFL history. Sounds weird to say, but it's true. During his rookie season, he was the first rookie QB ever to throw for 350 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions in a game. He also tied a record for most games in rookie season with 4 touchdown passes. Fast forward to his playoff debut in 2022, he became the first quarterback ever, not the first Giants quarterback ever, the first quarterback ever in the history of the NFL to throw for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and rush for 70 yards in a playoff game. And then he had a ton of success last year with the Colts. He completed 68% of his passes in 2025, which was the second best in Colts history, right smack behind Peyton Manning. So at his highest level, Daniel Jones has shown that he can be a really good performer, a really good quarterback. The issue is just consistency and health. Both of those things are a little bit outside of his control, right? He wasn't playing on a lot of great teams with the Giants, and I think that probably contributed. Had a lot of bad offensive line play around him, didn't have a ton of weapons. Not making excuses for him. A lot of it was his play, his ability to execute and see the field and move within the pocket as well. But if he can stay healthy, the Colts do have a chance on offense because they've got a really good run game, really good running back in Jonathan Taylor, good offensive line. In fact, through their first 10 games last year, before Daniel Jones' first significant injury, they averaged 145 yards on the ground per game. That was third best in the NFL. That was a big reason for their 8-2 start. They were dynamic, and they didn't just create big plays when they got to the perimeter. They could hit it up in the middle. They could generate big plays on inside runs, did it on a regular basis. And again, that was a combination of the offensive line, Jonathan Taylor, the run scheme, a little bit of the threat of Daniel Jones' legs. But after he broke his fibula, and he couldn't really factor into the run game as much for 2 games, and then certainly once he was down for the year, defenses just loaded up to stop Jonathan Taylor. They dared the Colts to throw. And then Indy's production on the ground just cratered. It was cut in half. They averaged about 79 yards per game over those final 7 games. And they were a just completely different offense. They kind of had to be. They tried to be, obviously, brought in Phillip Rivers. But Daniel Jones was instrumental both to the passing game and to the run game. So if he can stay healthy this year, there's no reason to believe the Colts can't play an entire season the way they did in the first 10 games last year. But that is a huge if. And you can apply that to the other side of the ball, too. The defense, if they get DeForest Buckner back for a full season, Sauce Gardner plays a full season, they have a good defensive coordinator in Lou Anarumo, who was, I wouldn't say the talk of the town back when he was the Bengals defense coordinator, but there were a couple years in there where he was a hot head coaching candidate because of how good his defenses looked, and those defenses played a huge role in the Bengals getting to 2 straight AFC Championship games and 1 Super Bowl. There's no reason to believe Anarumo can't do it again. Just a matter of having the players, and those players staying healthy. But the bottom line with this team is that they have to make some kind of jump this year. Shane Steichen has been exactly mediocre as their head coach. He's 25-26 in 3 seasons. It was a little surprising to see the Colts keep him just in today's NFL. If you have 3 straight seasons where you don't really progress much, normally you get the heave-ho. I think management probably saw how well they played in the first half of the season and injuries decimate them, and they said, well, that's not on Steichen. But I have a hard time believing that they're going to let him stay around if the Colts have another 9-8, 8-9 or worse season. So this is a big year. This is a big year for the future of the franchise because it could determine who's the head coach in 2027 and beyond, and it'll play a big role in determining what they do at the quarterback position moving forward as well. All right, our last team, the Tennessee Titans. Look, I don't expect much out of them this year, but I do think they'll make some kind of turnaround. Whatever you want to say about Robert Saleh as a head coach, you can have your gripes with their decision to hire him. I won't necessarily disagree with you. But as a defensive coach, he normally gets his teams playing well. He normally has defenses that fly around the field, get after the quarterback, play with energy, and I see no reason why the Titans can't make a huge jump from where they were last year. Saleh inherits defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons, who is going to be to his defense what Quinnen Williams was in New York. The Titans added a bunch of other players to that defensive line, John Franklin Myers, Jermaine Johnson, drafted Keldrick Falk at the end of the first round. That's a pretty good rotation of pass rushers, which is something that's always important for a Robert Saleh defense, the ability to get to the quarterback with 4. So I do think they'll be able to have some kind of turnaround on defense. Maybe they won't be a top 10 unit right away, but there's no reason they can't be middle of the pack or top half of the league. The biggest question for the Titans, though, is their quarterback. And not just their quarterback, but getting help for their quarterback. Cam Ward is supremely talented. One of the most talented throwers in the game. Had a bit of a rough rookie season. It wasn't exactly a great situation. Head coach got fired 6 games in. That's never a good thing during a rookie year, but a lot of his issues were him trying to make too many plays instead of sticking with the offense, hitting his back foot, getting the ball out. That's an issue you see with a lot of playmaking style quarterbacks. But Ward got better as the year went on, so that's always an encouraging sign. The big thing, though, is that he needs help. The protection wasn't very good last year. The Titans ranked 30th in pressure percentage. He didn't have support from a run game. They ranked 30th as well. His receivers didn't give him much help. They couldn't stretch the field. Titans ranked just 27th in air yards per completion, 25th in completions of 20 yards or more, so they couldn't get the big play. They weren't very reliable. Titans receivers ranked 11th in drop percentage. When they did manage to get their hands on the ball, they couldn't do much with it. They were in the bottom 10 in yards after the catch per completion. So on the one hand, you say Cam Ward looked very raw at times last season. On the other hand, you say how much of that was what he had around him. So that's the biggest thing that Titans GM Mike Borgonzi did this offseason. He set out to get him help. Signed receiver Wan'Dale Robinson, who caught 92 passes for over 1,000 yards last year. Just for context, there was no wide receiver on the Titans roster last year who had more than 48 catches. Borgonzi also used the 4th overall pick on Carnell Tate, who's a very reliable receiver, catches everything. He's a great route runner. And I think he's exactly the type of receiver that Cam Ward needs. He needs a reliable guy, someone who's going to be exactly where he expects him to be, someone who's going to catch everything, be a nice big target for him, run the correct routes, run good routes. But perhaps most importantly, the Titans got Cam Ward a good offensive mind. They hired Brian Daboll, who you can say what you want to about his head coaching tenure with the Giants. He did a good job with the quarterback position. Had Jackson Dart playing really well for a rookie quarterback during the 7 games that Daboll was there before he got fired. He helped revive Daniel Jones' career in his first season with the Giants back in 2022. Helped lead to that record-setting playoff performance that I talked about earlier. And then, of course, he was instrumental in developing Josh Allen with the Bills from 2018 to 2021. He was there for Allen's formative years. So that's 3 quarterbacks who are all very talented dual threats that Daboll has great experience with and a track record of getting the most out of their talents. That's exactly what you're looking for if you're the Titans, because Cam Ward is cut from the same cloth as those quarterbacks in terms of physical talent, the ability to make plays outside of structure. I think Daboll is going to do a good job of harnessing that, and I'm very curious to see what this offense looks like, what Ward looks like in his second year. Stability can do some amazing things for young quarterbacks. Again, I don't expect the Titans to do much this season, but if they get 6 wins, 6-7 wins, I think that's the goal. I think you'd be happy with that. Then you make your move in 2027. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Substack, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We are so close to the NFL season, have just 2 more divisions to take a look at, and they happen to be 2 of the most interesting ones. Next week, we'll return for the NFC West. Week after that, we'll do the AFC West. But I think that's everything I've got for you today, and I'll talk to you next time.